speaker, Adriana Bankston, would be talking to us about the science policy opportunities at JSPG. Adriana is a principal legislative analyst at the University of California Office of Federal Governmental Relations in Washington, D.C., where she serves as an advocate for the university with Congress, the administration, and federal agencies. Prior to this, Adriana was a policy and advocacy fellow at the Society of Neuroscience, where she provided staff support for special and ongoing projects, including the Society's annual lobby event and the annual meetings. In addition to working at UC, she is the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Publisher of Journal of Science Policy and Governance, an internationally recognized nonprofit organization and peer-reviewed publication dedicated to empowering early career scientists, engineers, policy professionals in international science policy debate. She is also a biomedical workforce and policy research investigator at the STEM Advocacy Institute, as well as a member of the Engaging Scientists and Engineering Policy Coalition Steering Committee. Adriana earned her PhD in biochemistry, cell and developmental biology from Emory University. Thank you, Adriana, for talking to us about the opportunities that are available with JSPG today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Let's see if I can. I'm going to share some of our links as I'm talking about where you can reach out to us. Okay, let's see. All right, well, thanks for the invitation. Always excited to talk to trainees about science policy and excited that you're interested in the journal. So as has been said, I'm a legislative analyst with the University of California. So we advocate for interests of the university and just generally higher education and research policy. And the journal, as I'll tell you about, is focused on early career researchers and helping publish and train folks in policy. So you can, I put our Twitter handles here, Adriana Bankston, SciPol Journal, if you'd like to follow us, and also shared the channels in the chat. So I think when I first got the invitation, I heard that it might be helpful to actually talk a little bit about science policy. So I'm just going to give a little background about what policy is and how we think about it, and then transition into the journal. So the basics of science policy, and this is a good book, Beyond Sputnik from 2008, but it's a very good resource, defines national science policy as the set of federal rules, regulations, methods, practices, guidelines under which scientific research is conducted. So it's really broad. There's sort of two major concepts: science for policy and policy for science. Depending on the type of job you have, you may end up doing one or the other, or sometimes switch. Science for policy is what you would typically think of as evidence-based policy, scientific findings that are used to develop public policy. And policy for science is government laws, regulations, and policies affecting the practice of science. So this is somewhat where our role falls into in terms of thinking about how we are impacting trainees and scientists who are in the university, and how we make their research known on the Hill, but also how do we think about improving the practice of science within the university? So it's sort of both ways. And science and policy really influence each other in general in a sort of bi-directional fashion. And so generally, if you're new to science policy, you might think about why would you engage in this? What is interesting about it? And what can you do with it? So I think, and some of this has been through my own experience and really learning how policy works and what it can do. It really gives you an exposure to different ways of thinking. So if you're thinking about a specific area of policy that you want to work on or change something about it, It really gives you a broad understanding of the topic. You end up looking at a number of different resources and different stakeholders involved in that topic. Really expands your understanding of the world, and a lot of these issues in science are international, and they're able to address important problems in society. So a lot of different things that are being discussed now, like climate change, diversity in science, some of these things are relevant, and will be also long-term issues that you can think about at different scales that you might want to work on in policy. And you can really impact specific issues of interest. So my work, as I said, is very specific on universities. And with the pandemic, it's been very, there are a lot of discussions about the STEM workforce and the pipeline and what happens to trainees who want to get jobs either in science or maybe want to transition into policy. What does it look like, and how do we really train the next generation, given that the pandemic has really impacted their trajectories? So I think that policy is a good way to impact this sort of topics. Again, my interest is more about the STEM workforce, but policy does give you a way to impact specific areas. And if you work in federal policy, I think, again, you really get a big picture of what's happening at the national level in specific areas, which is really interesting, and where you fit in that picture. And then finally, community and public engagement. So this is, again, I think with the pandemic, there's been a lot of discussions about what does it mean to be a scientist and engage the public? How do we engage policymakers more, and really thinking about what scientists are bringing to the table, and how do we fight misinformation, that sort of thing. So public engagement, I think, has become a more prevalent area of what it's like to be a scientist and do research today, because you really want to impact other stakeholders. So just before I get into the writing of the journal, I always give this sort of background about why it's important to learn communication and writing for science policy. A lot of my job is writing, probably more than 80%, all sorts of different documents. Again, we're pushing different priorities on the Hill. So obviously we do work in advocacy, but any sort of job, you'll be doing a lot of writing and policy, regardless of what kind of job you have. It's just a big part of the job. So scientists, to put a plug here, the policymakers a lot of times don't have backgrounds in science. They really rely on scientists to bring the expertise and information that they can use to develop their positions. A lot of, we'll go through some of the writing, but the way that you would write policy would be either you want to sort of push a specific policy, or you can have a sort of balanced ideas about a specific area and present this to the policymaker and say, here's the pros and cons, here's the different things you can do. So a lot of times you're just providing information to them, and then they make the decision based on that. There is a little bit of relationship building here too. So why would they listen to you as a scientist? You want to build relationships and establish legitimacy and trust with them. And you start to build relationships with Hill staff, for example, that can help you influence these things. One other thing to keep in mind is policy moves fast. So that's one of the reasons I do enjoy federal policy. Is always something different. You're always sort of in the action, moving along, and trying to get your ideas in legislation or specific priorities. And so it's important to really be able to hone your message into an easily digestible summary that a legislator can read quickly and understand kind of what you're asking them. It also has to be relevant to how they operate and what their needs are. So this will depend on who the legislator is, for example, and what they're interested in, how they might react to the recommendations you're bringing, and then telling a story. So I think this does apply to writing a paper too, because you're sort of have evidence and showing a specific data that you're building your paper around, but it does create a story in the end about how you want to present this information into kind of a comprehensive paper and story. So now moving on to the journal. So You'll see in some of the links I shared, we are an internationally recognized open access and peer-reviewed publication. We're also a nonprofit, and we're really focused on early career scholars, students, postdocs, and we want to publish articles in a wide variety of areas in science, technology, policy. We then think through how do we engage stakeholders with some of this work. So part of it is going through the publication process. And then we do try to organize events, as I'll show you later, but ways for authors to talk about their papers and get their ideas out there a little more, because we don't want to just be, an online journal. We really try to create more of a community around the journal and the ideas that are being shared. And the last point here is that we do want to be a platform for professional development to help help you learn research and writing credentials. So some of this will be through the submission process, editorial process. We also have opportunities for the editorial board where you can help sort of hone some of the issues and articles that are published. So, and then we also do trainings in writing. So I'll talk about that. So it's really is a journal, but we're trying to expand beyond just the papers and sort of more actionable things, and also training people to write policy. So the mission, I already said, so we are doing really more trainings in the past couple of years, because a lot of us are academics and understand that, these things you really don't learn while you're at the bench. So it's nice to have somebody offer these. And again, it's really helpful for when you're going to the real world and have to write policy documents. And then thinking through how this engagement can be taken forward at all levels of government. So the publications are, range from a lot of different levels of scope. Some people write for their local legislators. So, they want to change something in their city or their state. Some things are very broad in terms of, national, international scope of specific policies. So really it does cover a lot of areas, and we're trying to think through how this interaction might happen and what the scope is, whether it's state, federal, something else. And then we also want to stimulate a forum for debates. Like I said, we have events where we're trying to take these ideas further into thinking, how can we make these ideas actionable? How do we take these to a policymaker? What does that mean? And so we're starting to build more of this kind of engagement beyond publications as well. So in general, we publish a large variety of formats. Op-eds and memos are probably the most common. And these range from shorter 2,000, 3,000 words to longer papers. So what you would think of as an academic paper, like policy position paper, for example, white papers, book reviews, that sort of thing. So we are a policy journal, but it's somewhat academic in a sense, in that some of the things we publish, and a lot of these are relevant in policy and you would actually write them, but it's more on the academic side, to where the structure of the paper is actually more similar to academic paper. And then we keep this broad. So this is a long list of topics here that we write on. We keep it broad on purpose to make sure that, if you have ideas you want to write on, they probably will fit in one of these. We're pretty liberal as far as the things we publish on. Obviously, this is not everything, but it's a good general list of the ideas that are being published in policy. And I'll show you a few examples of things we published. So the cycle is, so in terms of opportunities, we have 2 standard issues and 2 to 4 special issues. The standard issues are pretty much anything. You can submit on any topic that we publish on, any format. This is twice a year, so I'll go through that as well. And then special topics, which are sponsored by a specific organization, and they're focused in scope or topic, like a climate change issue, for example. And some of the opportunities will depend on the partners and what they can offer to the authors. In terms of eligibility, so as I said, we're focused on early career. So undergrad, grad students, postdocs, policy fellows who are within 5 years of their degree, and early career professionals. So it's fairly liberal in a sense, but we do target early career. So there's a certain cutoff to where you're no longer early career. So we really want to encourage trainees and folks who are sort of coming out of school and maybe in their first fellowship or first job to submit and to really help them in their policy careers as well, because these papers do help in professional development. Like I said, we publish on a large variety of disciplines. Anyone from any professional background can submit. And because we're so focused on early career, sometimes we'll have senior scholars that want to be on the paper, like their PI, as long as most of the authors are trainees, and if they have, they want to have their PI on the paper, they can. But we really encourage most of the authors to be early career, and maybe you can have, if you want, you can have one that is more established. So this is sort of the way the process works, and I'll go through this because I can highlight a few opportunities at all these stages. So this is helpful to kind of roll out the way the process works. So we announced a call for submissions for standard special issues. I'll go through the dates. Prior to the submission deadline, so typically there's probably about 4 to 6 months between the announcement and the submission. During that time, we organize events, policy writing workshops and webinars. The workshops are a good opportunity to develop the outline. You work in groups. We bring experts to talk about policy writing, and then you can have practice and breakouts. And then the webinars are typically for experts in the field. Again, this applies also to special issues where we have very specialized panels of people who are can sort of help think through some of the hot topics. They're sort of really at the forefront of policy in a specific area, so you can learn from them about what they're saying, and then use that to build your writing based on these ideas. And then after the submission, there's a peer review process where we have an editorial board. So like I said, this is also actually an opportunity for early career scientists to apply to the board. So I'll talk about that too. And then the process itself, if your publication gets accepted, it'll go through refining, going back with the editors for a couple of months before publication. If it gets rejected, we might recommend you resubmit. We provide feedback, and there are certain recommendations we can make about resubmission. Publication, I'll share a few dates with you, and then, like I said, after publication, we're really thinking more through how can we elevate the work. So we've had authors speak at panels, conferences. We do have a podcast also that we're trying to get students and postdocs to talk about their work and disseminate that on social media. Media engagement, we've done a little bit of this, but this is something we're going to do more of, really pitching these ideas into like a magazine or New York Times, that sort of thing. So that's something to really kind of take this a little further. We've had authors provide testimonials and help with some of these workshops, so it's always nice to hear from them about their experience, and they talk about their memos and some of these trainings we've done, and so it's nice to let them do that. And then tracking, again, this is more internal for us, but thinking through how JSPG is really helping trainees progress in policy and what they're going after they publish. That's another goal. So, sorry. Okay. So the deadlines, the standard issues are always May and November. So this year will be May 22nd, November 20th. Again, this is broad in terms of topics and formats. And then special issues are sponsored by different groups. So we have one Currently, these are our 2 call for submissions as far as special topics. So one is about STEM education and workforce development. The deadline is actually this weekend. It's sponsored by Sigma Xi. So we've done a lot of webinars and one writing workshop as part of this to talk about what do we think about, the future of education and workforce development with the pandemic. What does that look like in the future? And hopefully we'll get some good ideas from this this issue, submissions for the issue. And then we have another one in science diplomacy, which you may be interested in. So this is a growing area. This is very international, sponsored by Department of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Public Policy, University of College London. We brought on specific partners that are really kind of at the forefront in diplomacy and can help us disseminate this, but also they really are doing diplomacy day to day. And so we want to hear from them about what ideas they have and what they think the most relevant topics are now. So just to piggyback on this, because it's coming up, we have a webinar on January 25th about science diplomacy and global challenges. February 15th will be more about inclusivity, diversity, underrepresented communities, and diplomacy. And then we'll have a writing workshop in March, where, again, this is kind of the typical format. We'll have a speaker talking about how to write policy, and you'll be able to practice on that. And this will be all themed around policy, but we do this for other issues too. So these are the events coming up. So we have really great panelists. This is mostly organized by JC Modud, who's our advisor for international engagement. And so he invited these folks, and you can see they're really high level people. Bakshar, who is the former ambassador of India. Marcella works for Inter-American Institute for Global Change Research. Juan Marco Muller, also as an advisor. And then Minha Pham works for French Embassy in the UK. So we're really hoping to get different perspectives from them. Again, this is sort of the content side of things, of experts providing content and policy, and they're really kind of at the forefront of this topic. And then this is the other panel, one good of this, but it's quite mixed as well. I'll point out Romain Lorenzi, who is executive director of a UNESCO section, and he was former Minister of Science for Rwanda. Again, trying to bring sort of like the diversity session to this. We also work with INCSA, which is the International Network for Government Science Advice, which is really big. So it should be a great discussion. And then to be determined, the writing workshop is still being planned and will be promoted soon. So to give a little more context about other opportunities, so I mentioned we do organize these writing workshops for all of the issues. So we did one on intersectional science policy with National Science Policy Network. Last year, we had 5 workshops. These are all on YouTube, so you can also watch and learn about from the speakers. The green here is the events we've done for the STEM education issue. Again, we have 3 webinars and a writing workshop last year. These are all on YouTube also. Encourage you to watch them. They're helpful also just for learning about these topics. For the climate issue, this is one of the webinars we did leading up to COP26, which happened last year, which was a large international climate conference. And these are all for special issues. So these are the kind of events we do. And then the last thing here, advancing your science policy career. This was a panel for a standard issue that was sponsored by AAAS Science Technology Policy Fellowships Program. So because it's a standard issue, it was broad in terms of submissions, but because we don't have a topic for these issues, we make it more kind of professional development focused. And so we organize career panels, that kind of thing, which seems to work well. And so this one, everyone on the panel here actually was a fellow. Either actually Stephanie was a fellow, but everyone else had finished their fellowship and talked about how the journal helped their career, how the program helped their career, and we really have established a good collaboration with them. So this is again, you can also watch this on YouTube. A good way to learn more about policy careers for standard issues. So we're starting to do more events for that too. Another opportunity, so now moving on to the publication section, editorial board, as I said, we encourage trainees to submit to this. It is really great for professional development. You get to edit a few issues a year. And you probably would be working on both standard and special. We try to match people what they're interested in and see how that all works out, but it's worked well so far. We anticipate to have a lot of publications this year. So we're actually doing 2 cohorts. One application cycle is already just opened a few days ago until March. The other one will be later from July to August. And we've timed them to basically start prior to our standard issues, which is really when things kind of ramp up, May and November, to then have the editors on hand, and we do trainings, onboarding. And then we also had a open house for the first time this year in December, which is, you can also watch on YouTube, which kind of Q&A style, talk more about the process. And we had some editors there and some of our leadership who talked about the process, also helpful. So we encourage you to apply to this. It's a nice opportunity for trainees to develop these skills. So now moving on to the publication, just to give you a flavor of the kinds of things we published all last year, actually. So special issues on climate change solutions, and some of this is, we're trying to be very relevant to what's happening in the policy space, things that are topics of interest. So, but also some of this depends on the partners that sponsored and kind of how they see and how they want to shape it. So climate change solutions, obviously this is a big topic, was sponsored by the UK Science Innovation Network. A general kind of broader theme about shaping the future of science policy will really engage a lot of trainees in this around science, the endless frontier. So 75 years from the publication of the book, which is a big deal. This was sponsored by AAAS and Kavli Foundation. We had an issue around intersectional science policy with NSPN, very much diversity focused on a lot of topics, very relevant also and well received. And the last one here is a standard issue, actually. So this is slightly different. This is our November 2021 issue, which celebrated 10 years since the journal has been in existence and publishing. So we kind of made it like a anniversary type of issue, but it's a standard issue otherwise, and we had some nice kind of opening remarks and so on. So these are some things we've done, again, pretty broad, trying to keep it somewhat interesting and relevant. And then I thought it would be helpful to share a few authors published from University of Chicago or Chicago area, so we have Northwestern, just to sort of see what kinds of things. And again, these are just 3 examples, but to see that, they do publish. These are all related to climate sort of thing from different issues. But just kind of FYI, you can check these out if you want to see what your colleagues have done. So moving on now to the highlighting the work. Again, this is a work in progress, and there's a lot of things we can do, and we're working to develop relationships to really elevate the work. And some of this depends on kind of what the partners think, but on the left, this is authors who published the climate issue. The UK Science Innovation Network basically provided opportunities for published authors to talk about their papers at our British Embassy. Obviously, it was a virtual meeting, but really nice. They talked about their ideas, how they kind of see these ideas implemented. We had some high-level folks from UK as well. So this was a nice opportunity to get them to get these ideas in front of the audiences that really might be able to actually implement them. Another example, we started last year this podcast, SciPol Soundbites, where we interview authors and then disseminate the work. Again, this is one of the environmental topics from the climate issue. So that's a good example of presentations, and then podcasts that we do to get authors to talk about what they published and then disseminate that. And they're excited to be on the podcast. So the action part of this, again, keeping with the climate theme. So again, authors from the climate issue spoke with fellows from ASU. So this is the Center for Science of the Imagination. So they have this climate fellowship. And the fellows initially developed kind of narrative writing, scenario-based writing, to where, again, the authors sort of mingled with them and learned from them about how do you write this kind of creative thing from their papers, again. And then it's sort of a scenario-based discussion of how would you apply this to, year 2050 in a certain scenario. That kind of thing was really interesting. This is on YouTube also. So that's one way to kind of get them to think about, again, their ideas with folks who actually work on these topics. And then it was a nice workshop. Another thing we did last year, well, this is something new. So OSTP was looking for input on their ideation challenge. The time is now. So this is sort of like a DEI. How can we improve DEI in science? Again, and then you can see here 3 of the authors, Andrew, Lindsay, and Jeremy, all published in the issue with the future of science policy that I showed you. And then we use their papers again and their ideas to craft a response to OSTP to respond to this challenge, which we did. And they're very excited that their ideas were making it to, a real world thing that was happening last year. So just a few examples of things that we're trying to do to leverage some of these publications. Conference panel, just a couple of things. So we have presented at the NSPM symposium. I forget which issue. I think actually both of these are from our issue with NSPN, the intersectional science policy. Again, we had this workshop on memos where the authors talked about their memos in the issue, and then a little more about their experience with the journal, which is also nice to see. And then we had a session at SACNAS, Nicole and Patricia, who are, again, 2 published authors, talking about their experience and their publications as well. So these are a few things, and again, trying to do more, create more opportunities for them to speak. The media highlights, again, this is, it's quite a bit of work because we're trying to establish relationships with media outlets and different groups. So if anybody has relationships you'd be willing to connect us, let me know. But this was really interesting. So this paper was published also last year, calls for diversifying languages in which we publish, essentially. The authors, again, are from Chicago schools or Illinois. And we actually translated this paper into five or six other languages, which is interesting. So trying to kind of leverage this idea into, can we actually publish non-English versions of this paper? So that was interesting. And then that was highlighted by Northwestern in this snippet here, which you can read on the website, about how we need more diversity in publication language. So another kind of interesting experiment, that way to highlight the publication in media. And then the governing board. So I put this here because I wanted to show where people from JSPG go, and that's a long-term project. But Adriana Bankston was actually our first or second editor-in-chief many years ago. She's now on the governing board. You know, she was a scientist and started her her policy career with AAAS fellowship. She's been at the academies for many years in different roles, and she is a really great advocate for early career scientists. And so it's nice to see folks who were established, and, you know, when she started, she wasn't, but she kind of used the experience with the journal to build her career, and came back and talked to us. And so we're doing this leadership chat series, which also started last year, to talk to people who are more established and talk about how they think the journal has helped them advance, that sort of thing. So keep an eye out. We might have more chats this year. But she's a good example of somebody who's really leveraged the journal, I think, for her career too. And then Keiko Izumi, who used to be on the governing board, he works for the White House now, so they have restrictions for OSTP actually, as far as what they can do, because they work there, so they're not allowed to be on certain things or committees. But again, he's a very well-known person in the field who works there. This is somebody to watch and see kind of where he's gone in his career, and he still helped until last year, I think, when he joined OSTP. He's been on the board for a long time and really helpful too. So that's really all I had. I think I shared these already. You can follow us on all the channels. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. Again, all of our trainings are there. We have a newsletter that goes out every month when all the events and issues and new issues coming out. So I encourage you to subscribe to that as well and keep up to date what we're doing. And then this is my contact. I can share this as well if you'd like to chat more. My LinkedIn and Twitter and my website.
Thank you so much, Adriana. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask or just type it in the chat box. One of our audience did mention that the website's not working currently. So maybe you could look back in some time and hopefully it's working.
Yeah, it's for some reason it's down today. Sorry about that. Just keep those links on hand, it'll work. But you can follow us on the socials.
I also wanted to mention that the recording of this session would also be put onto the JSPG YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and look at it, you can take a look in a few days, or maybe probably contact me and I could provide you with a version if interested.
So one thing I will say, because our website isn't working now, so I created this folder with general things that we would have on the website, essentially like the submission guidelines, a few examples. We have the application for the editorial board there, so you can still read these things now while we're working on the website. This is basically what's online. It's just a folder or PDF. And also links to the submission forms and then the events as well. So you can still sign up because the forms are separate from the website. So hopefully that helps for now.
All right, if there are no other questions, thank you so much again for talking to us about all the opportunities. Everyone has Adriana's contact, so if anyone wants to directly get in touch with her, I'm sure they would. Thank you once again.